it's 2025. You know what that means. We are back. Michael Jordan has sent his fax. We're back. Chris, what does that mean?
We are so back.
We are so back, y'all. So glad we got a little chance to decompress with a few weeks. Some things happened over the holidays, so we'll certainly have to talk about that on today's episode. But it was nice to decompress. I got to spend some time with my little boy Teddy. I got to be honest, coming back to work this week was really tough. But here I am, a little bit under protest, but here I am. Glad to be with all of you. We're going to give two quick important announcements, and then we're going to jump into introductions and our agenda. First thing, the Leadership Institute is coming to Illinois early this year to do trainings for candidates. This is mostly for candidates who are running in the April 1st, or if you have a primary, the February elections that are coming up. But I couldn't believe it myself when I saw there are multiple candidates who are already announced for 2026 in a couple congressional races, some legislative races. It's too damn early. But if you want to come to our training and you're running into 2026, that's perfectly fine. So we have 3 trainings in the books already. There's one in Normal on January 25th, one in Edwardsville and the Metro East on February 1st, and one in Plainfield on February 8th. So if you're interested in going to one of those Leadership Institute trainings, they are sending in national experts. I'll also be there. There'll be other experts there to help train you. It's a full day candidate development workshop. So if you're interested in the Normal one on January 25th, go to leadershipinstitute.org/normal. If you're interested in the Metro East one, go to leadershipinstitute.org/Metro East. That one's on February 1st. And then on February 8th in Plainfield, it's leadershipinstitute.org/Plainfield. If you could get a group together of center-right future candidates, current candidates, leaders in your region, and you want Leadership Institute to come out, they are interested in helping us train in Illinois. They'll happily come out if you can get a group together. So let us know, contact us if in your region you'd like to host a training. There's no sales pitches. Anyone here who's ever been to one of our trainings, we lose money on it. Core loses money. We don't make any money on these trainings. There's no sales pitches for our company. This is all altruistic to help our Republican candidates, our conservative candidates get better and win. So if you want to host a training in your area, contact us and let us know. Second quick announcement. If you're watching this or listening to this and you enjoy it, or maybe you don't enjoy it, we want to hear from you. As we get into 2025, we've been doing this for a year and a half, and I'll be honest, we're the blind leading the blind. We don't know what the hell we're doing. So if there's things you'd like to see us do more of, or things you'd like to see us do less of, you've got ideas for us, or if you just want to say that I suck as a host, that's cool. We'd love to hear from you. Please go to long9.studio/survey. Again, that's long9.studio/survey. We're going to ask you what segments you like, that you don't like, things you might want to see added. Please give us that feedback so we can be even better as we go into 2025 and 2026. With that, let me do some introductions for our excellent guests that we have with us this week. We've got to start with State Senator Steve McClure from the 54th District. You just survived lame duck session and the initial, finally, the beginning of this current session. We're so glad you could come join us, Steve.
Oh, glad to be back. Yeah, lame duck was a lot of fun.
Yeah, we're going to have some fun talking about it, I'm sure. We also have with us former House Republican floor leader Mark Batinick, current pollster and political expert. Mark, glad to have you with us.
Happy to be on, and you know what's fun? Not being at lame duck session.
Yeah, I think you're the winner of that one. We also have Collin Moseley, director of the Illinois Freedom Caucus, an all-around busy dude. What's going on, Collin?
Hey, just good to be here. Wrapped up day one of the 104th General Assembly today. We voted against some House rules, and so just kicking things off the right way, voting no.
Yeah, well, especially on rules that are meant to avoid any sort of input from the minority party. So certainly the correct position on that. We also have with us Core's political experts, Chris, Michael, Chris. What's up, guys?
Doing good. Good to be back. A lot to talk about.
2025, my New Year's resolution was to get off this podcast, and unfortunately, Collin still hasn't fired me yet. So we're gonna have to keep working on that throughout 2025.
I'll find some reason. We had I talked to somebody during the break who said they actually were like scared of you, Chris, because they pictured you as the villain. So if that's the impression you're going for, you're succeeding.
I'm not in this business to make friends, Collin. You know that.
Well, you have succeeded, my friend, at your goal. All right, let's get into first thing. We have already said it. We've dealt with lame duck caucus or lame duck session. The biggest thing that seemed to come out of that is this hemp bill that ended up dying an inglorious death. I'm sure we'll see it again in 2025. But really, though, it's not the bill itself that's the story here, though we can certainly talk about it if you guys wish. The story here is the fracture that's exposed between J.B. Pritzker and Mayor Johnson in Chicago, and between J.B. Pritzker and Speaker Chris Welch. During the course of this process, you had Johnson and Pritzker fighting against each other on this bill, and then you had Chris Welch, who hurt a lot of feelings in J.B. Pritzker's office with the way that he handled this bill, and there's still a lot of hurt feelings today, going into what's likely to be an extremely difficult session where Chicago is going to be begging for lots of money from Springfield, where we've got a $3 billion+ deficit we've got to deal with. The fact that Democrats are going into this session with so much disarray, probably not a real good sign for them. Curious what you guys saw from all this and what your thoughts are.
This has been boiling up for a while because, there's already been, and you're seeing this with some of the news publications that have been written in the aftermath of this hemp bill dying, is that there's been the House Democratic Caucus hasn't been going very well as of late. You're seeing that with the turnover in staff that we're going to be talking about here on this podcast later. And you're seeing that now with the downfall of this hemp bill at the hands of House Democratic Caucus after they literally sent J.B. Pritzker's staff out crying after they had a closed door caucus meeting regarding the bill. It's very interesting because, the Pritzker said he had 62 members committed to voting for this bill. And usually Welch just calls the bill then and there. But for whatever reason, they decided to caucus and the whole bill went up in flames. Very interesting stuff here. I also think this was probably the first time we've really seen Pritzker go after Brandon Johnson really hard. He's alluded to the fact that he doesn't like Brandon Johnson before, but in this case, he wasn't really holding back any punches. He said, I haven't talked to the mayor since September. He's ducking me on meetings. My staff tries to set up meetings. His staff tells us to kick rocks. So Pritzker's out there in the open. It's good politics for him to attack the mayor of Chicago, even though he might have lost on this particular bill.
I think the hemp bill is a perfect example. It makes me wonder if Speaker Welch has got short-term amnesia because, to Chris's point, you had 62 Democrats that were in support of this bill and probably a bunch of Republicans. I mean, I would say that bill would have passed the House with 90 votes or more. And so, but we're too afraid to ever call a bill that might have, 60 Dems and 40 Rs on it, especially with something like this. So, we won't even attempt to be bipartisan. And then the next day at inauguration, we're hearing about bipartisanship. And then the following day, we're voting on House rules with no minority input. So it's just back and forth. But yeah, the hemp bill's a disappointment. I mean, I think we had a chance to really come together on something with the governor's office and the Republicans. I mean, when does that happen ever? And Speaker Welch couldn't get it done.
My biggest concern with this thing is that I hope Republicans don't get in the way. I'm not sure we should just sit back and watch what's the infighting with the Democrats. They're in charge. They have the supermajorities. Let's not stop them from fumbling. My understanding is maybe Chris, the speaker's trying to flex a little bit, considering that the budget was shoved down their throats kind of last time. They took a back seat and they're a co-equal branch. And I remember back to the days of Madigan. Madigan always said, he's like, you know what? We tend to outlast governors, and who knows what Pritzker's next move is in just 2 years. So I wouldn't, if I had a billionaire in my own party, I wouldn't pick an unnecessary fight with them. But for some reason they did, and yeah, for Pritzker, this looks really good because it's really easy to pick on Brandon Johnson. So it's certainly a loss politically. It's a loss policy wise for the governor, but politically it's a win for the governor.
Yeah, I mean, looking at the bill, There were some questions as to how Pritzker handled this bill, simply because, Collin, you mentioned that the final vote would have been bipartisan, but I don't think anybody was saying that it was a perfect bill on the Republican side or the Democrat side. There were definitely improvements that could have been made. It's pretty clear here that the marijuana industry got some of the things they wanted to try to basically just shut down the hemp industry, because that's what they want. Listen, they're businesses. Hemp doesn't want any regulations because it's going to cost them money. I don't blame them for that. Marijuana wants to just shut down hemp because that costs them money. So they're doing their things. There's no one faults them for going out and making money. That's the point of business. But there are certainly some parts of this bill that could have been cleaned up to be a little more balanced and a little more common sense. But as a few people reported, Pritzker didn't seem interested in that early on, and just sort of ran through what he wanted, and then it fell apart at the end. So I don't know that Pritzker can skirt complete blame on this one for sure. All right, well, let's keep moving on. And it's not the only thing that happened during veto session, so let's keep moving on to a couple other things. This is really just a catch-all topic here for everybody, because I know when each of you were submitting your topics, you kind of each had things you wanted to talk about related to veto session. Collin, you mentioned the rules, and obviously there were a few bad bills that were passed there. One bill that was passed changes the term prostitution to person engaged in sex trade, which is just like changing the criminal to justice impacted individual. Just this stuff drives me crazy. I know you also want to talk about the name change bill. Karina's law passed. I don't know if anybody wants to talk about that. There's a few other things that came up during the course of lame duck. So free for all, jump in with your thoughts if you have any on lame duck.
Well, I'd like to jump in if I can. We had a very good bipartisan bill a few months ago regarding the Prisoner Review Board. The Prisoner Review Board is probably the biggest success Republicans have had since Governor Pritzker's taken office, where he had people that were absolutely so far left. They did not have any concerns about victims. It was all about the criminals, and they were releasing all kinds of psychos. And so there was a bipartisan bill to change that, and got out of the Senate, and it died in the House. And now, right before the end of session, President Harmon had a partisan bill that was going to change the Prisoner Review Board in a way, in my view, that would cause a lot more people to be released and to make things much worse. And so myself, Senator Plummer, Senator Bryant gave some very strong speeches, I felt, on the floor. Several Democrats joined us, and therefore it had just a very slim majority to pass, and then it died in the House and was never called. And so I thought that was a pretty big Republican victory, because that's a major issue, and I think Republicans across the last few years have been on the side of victims and law enforcement and trying to fight crime. And the Democrats, my goodness, I've never seen anything like this before, where they just seem to want crime to get worse and worse and worse, from their prosecutors that they support, like Kim Foxx, to the laws that they put in place. It's been unbelievable. And so it was another good victory for Republicans in the Senate. And, I think it's time to get back to trying to actually fight crime instead of trying to encourage it, which is all Democrats seem to be wanting to do these days.
Well, and Pritzker and Harmon just keep playing games with PRB. I mean, I didn't even hear that story, Steve. So thanks for sharing that.
Do you think it'll come back again, Senator?
I think if it comes back, it's going to come back with more Republican input. It's just bizarre to me. So, like, the Senate has the authority and the obligation to advise and consent any Pritzker nominees. And so for the Senate to say, well, what's the House think, or what's the governor think? No, this should be left to us to decide as a body, because that's our duty based on our Constitution. And so the governor should not have input on this, in my view. Neither should the House. And the House should defer to us. And so I would just suggest that that's the way this bill should be negotiated, because there was a supermajority of Republicans that voted for it, and Democrats. And so that's what should happen in the spring session, to get some true reforms that actually solve the problem. This bill, in my view, at the end of the day, would make things worse.
Collin, what are your thoughts on? I know you had a few things coming out of lame duck you wanted to talk about.
Yeah, I think, so one of them was the Karina's law, which was about domestic violence victims on its surface, and they always do this to us, right? They always tie this stuff to emotional appeals to make us look like monsters whenever people vote no. But because the concern with this bill is that there's no due process, it could potentially be unconstitutional. Talking about search warrants to seize firearms, and then and on the back end you have the whole issue with the fact that it takes the state police months to restore a FOID card, which has been an ongoing problem. We had a name change bill that.
Yeah, Collin, let's talk about Karina's Law, just in case anyone has thoughts on that one. I mean, that for our people who are watching this, for those who may not have watched, we've talked about it a few times, but in essence, the idea here with Karina's Law or Karina's Bill, I can't remember which it's called, is the idea that if a domestic abuser, you want to take away the firearm from that domestic abuser. That's the heart of the law. And some of the lobbyists and people involved on the pro Second Amendment side and gun rights side have said, hey, we'll work with you on something like this, because the people who most want to see guns out of the hands of people who wish to do harm with those guns are law-abiding gun owners. They want to see these guns out of the hands of those who wish to do evil with them. So they said, let's sit at the table, let's work on this. There was very little interest from the left on that because, as you said, Collin, they had this emotional issue. They could capitalize on it, and they don't really care what the issue is. In the end, their end goal is just to get rid of all guns no matter what. So any excuse they have to take one step in that direction, they're just going to take it. The unfortunate thing is, somebody who likes to see more common sense legislation put forward is, I think many of us could agree that if you're a domestic abuser and it's clear that you are and you wish harm on your spouse, you should not have a firearm. So there is common ground here that we could all find. I heard the bill was improved a little bit, but Collin, to your point, what they've done is created this big hole here where without due process, guns can be taken away from someone. So now this is going to go up to the Supreme Court, and it has a decent chance of being overturned because they didn't just fix this one little bit. They could have sat down at the table, negotiated, made some final tweaks to make this a common sense bill that would have withstood Supreme Court scrutiny. At this point now, we all have to wait and see. And more than likely, they get to pat themselves on the back for a bill that never ends up actually changing anything because it gets overturned in the courts. This is what drives me crazy about Illinois politics and governing, air quotes, in Illinois, is we get so close sometimes to something that could be a bipartisan common sense win, but people don't actually want that because that would require improving things instead of just playing political games.
And I think there were Republicans that did vote for it, and I'm not gonna trash them because I genuinely believe that the ones that did vote for it voted for it because they were focused more on what the heart of the intent was. And I think that every person supports what the heart of the intent was, to your point, but for the people that were really held up on the constitutional concerns, because to your point, here we have another bill that we're going to send back to the courts. We're going to tie it up in litigation for months and probably years, and we have got to quit doing that. It's just disgraceful.
Well, from a political perspective, one thing that we're going to have to see come down the pipeline here is those people who voted against it, and they might be in a competitive race. The Democrats are going to use this against it because this writes itself. Democrats are great at doing this. You're going to see ads out there that said Representative so-and-so oppose taking guns away from domestic abusers. This is coming down the pipeline. This is a perfect political bill for the Democrats to use, and it's smart politics for them to use it. It's just one of the things that if you're a Republican and you voted against this bill, you're in a competitive district, something you're going to have to think about.
A couple things on this. I mean, you're exactly right, Chris. This would have been. I'd like to see the final roll call because I know there were some Republicans that voted for it. But if you're in a competitive suburban district, this is a really hard bill to vote no on.
I would have to vote yes.
Yeah. I would have really had to have looked at the details to work on that. My biggest issue with the gun thing overall, though, is that if we had mandatory minimums and more, tougher sentencing and state's attorneys that actually went after violent offenders and all that other stuff, we wouldn't be dealing with as many problems as we're dealing with, right? Yeah. So I always go back to the shooting at the Thompson Center, the guy that shot it wasn't an officer, I believe it was a sheriff. He was a 3-time violent gun offender, which probably means he was involved in more than three issues, and he's back out on the street again, right? So if you're dealing with things on the front end with criminals and not making it so easy for the bad guys to be on the streets and doing things, you wouldn't have the need for gun laws because the bad guys would be put away or would be concerned about being put away. That's my biggest frustration is that they always want to deal with gun violence, but they don't want to do it in a way that takes the bad guys and locks them up.
Yeah, I mean, like actually solving the problem. I mean, I think there's pieces on both sides that we can say, okay, I concede to X, do you concede to Y? I mean, you can sit down and really put something in place that could make a huge impact on violence in general, let alone gun violence and crime. But it goes right back to what Steve said before about the Prisoner Review Board. I mean, it's just this is a political game for people. It's can we put together a bill that makes Republicans look bad so we can put it on a mail piece and a TV ad in the next election instead of just saying, hey, you know what? People are dying. Maybe let's put that above politics for once.
Well, and I think we've run, the Democrats have run into this problem time and time again, especially with these Second Amendment bills where, you know, they have an end goal in mind. And, you know, I'm sure that, you know, they want to see this addressed, but they didn't include that due process element in this bill like they should have. And which, like Collin, you know, everybody's been saying, this is going to get tied up in court. It's probably going to be overturned. And then we're going to be right back at square one. And they're going to have to try to address this again. Like it would have been very simple for them to add some kind of element of due process in here. And the off chance that, you know, somebody is falsely accused of domestic violence, they've got to have due process. And
yeah, they're going to say there is due process in here because in some of the cases, when you're trying to get that that order of protection, the accuser or the accused actually does get a chance to respond first, but in some they don't, and it's in the ones that they don't where this bill is going to get tripped up in the courts. And that's again, that was the small thing you could have addressed here. But anyways, to not belabor the point, Collin, there was something else you were talking about from Lame Duck.
Oh, I just also threw in there was the name change bill, which is inevitably going to make it difficult or more difficult to track down illegal immigrants and other offenders in our country and our state. But that one's a little more nuanced, but that's the red meat of it is we're making it easier to hide these people from Tom Homan's immigration authority.
Anyone else have thoughts on Lame Duck? I'll throw something out there, maybe try to start some controversy. I don't know. The House Republicans made it a big thing to say that lame duck is bad in general. We shouldn't have lame duck. We shouldn't be down here. That was really their big PR push, including the first couple of days, you know, doing a press conference in the snowstorm and saying, see, this is a giant waste of time. I'm curious what you guys think. I'll give my thoughts first, which is from what I've seen from the people of this state, they don't care about process. If you put a nice, juicy, succulent sausage on their plate, they don't care how that sausage was made. The people of the state want to know how you've made their lives better. They don't really care how you do it. I'm not saying that's right. The problem is in our polling, our message testing, our focus groups, we only see this in a few states, but Illinois is one of those states where we don't necessarily care how corrupt you are, how bad you are, how you made a bill pass or didn't pass, as long as in some way it made my life better. And so I think House Republicans, and I said this isn't after the fact, I said this before the fact, before lame duck even happened. I said this shouldn't be the approach. The approach should be, hey, listen, we need to lower costs for working families, and we will spend every day in Springfield from now until 10 years from now, if that's what it takes to help the families, the working families of this state. There's an easy narrative there because then when Democrats pass these crazy bills, you can say, why aren't we here helping hardworking families, middle-class Americans? Like that could be your narrative. The problem is when you attack saying, oh, we don't even want to be here, what you do is you leave the opposite side an easy way to respond. Democrats immediately came out and said, House Democrats are aware of Leader McCombie's desire to not do the work people sent us to do. We choose to continue our work advancing legislation to blah, 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 blah. It seems like we make moves and don't even think about what the other side's going to do in response. Like, you know, both sides get to play the chess game here. You think about the other side of the board too. We just keep walking into these scenarios where we set the other side up to make us look stupid. That's my thought on the matter. Some of you may agree, some of you may disagree, but hey, let's start some controversy. It's early in 2025.
Well, I would agree with that, Collin. One of the things that I know that I think it was Chris Miller spoke about on the House floor was on that first day that they were in session, they gavelled in and gavelled out like within 11 minutes. And it's like, okay, what's the point of this? I mean, obviously they all want their $184 per diem or whatever it is now. But, you know, that costs the taxpayers, you know, over 20 grand for them to gavel in for 11 minutes and not vote on a single, you know, bill or piece of legislation. I mean, I know that they want that check, but it's
But
absurd.
see, and Michael, that's to my point of it's how you do things. So then you use that as an example to say, look, Democrats keep wasting your money. Like it's how you do it. It's not we don't want to be here. It's we need to lower costs for working families. And look, they just wasted $20,000 of your tax dollars instead of lowering your taxes. Again, it's how you do it, not we don't want to be here. Mark, you
Yeah, I mean, look, the process. You're right. The process thing definitely doesn't play well. Nobody gives a crap. To a certain extent, I think it's what they feel they had at the moment. Dan Ugasti did what I thought should have been blown up a little bit more. That the caucus could have talked about. He filed before during lame duck and then filed after. He filed two bills, Constitution Amendment and a bill. Recallability for every elected official in the state of Illinois. You've got Brandon Johnson, who's just, it's embarrassing that he's the mayor of a city like the size of Chicago. You have Tiffany Hayward in Dalton or South, whatever, Dalton, I believe, in the south suburbs, where we shouldn't have had to wait to remove her. You've had Madigan there forever. You've had millions of examples where the citizens should have had the ability to recall. It could have been a topic I think they could have blown up a little bit more. I agree. I mean, I think there's a potpourri of things like, you can kind of combine the two, like, look, we're coming down here to do nothing. Instead, we should be doing A, B, C. Otherwise, don't call us down. Call us down when you're.
And I like the kudos you gave. Ugasti did a great job. I want to give kudos to Jed Davis. He said, he put out something, hey, listen, 5 days until the lame duck session, will the majority party take any action to assist local families in overcoming crippling inflation and impending deficits? I mean, he was putting that focus in the right place. So I also wanted to give kudos to Jed Davis. I thought that was good too.
Yeah, I agree. That's the right tone. If I have a criticism of the Republican caucus, is that I think they've been a little bit afraid of their own shadow, not aggressive enough on a whole bunch of things. They're just, we're in the super minority. I'm sure we could lose a couple more seats, but I think at some point you have to start being aggressive and throwing some things out there. And I know some of the things I want to hit that gets later on in your menu, but I think there's a lot of things that we could be more aggressive on, and it's going to be exacerbated the next several months because we're finally seeing the effects of the overspending, of counting on the COVID money. The inflation isn't there. The economy is cooling. There's going to be a lot of issues that the Democrats papered over with last budget that's going to be a little bit harder to paper over this time.
Yep.
There's plenty of fodder for us, so don't let them off though.
We got low hanging fruit that we need to totally take every advantage of. I'm with you, Mark. I'm all for us getting more aggressive, because what do we? I think one problem that I feel like we've had is that what are we afraid to lose? God forbid that the speaker not invite us out to dinner, or God forbid that we can't go have drinks with Natalie Manley. I mean, come on. Like at some point, it's like we have got to give up this idea that somehow being nice to each other, being nice is fine, but laying down on an issue in the name of being nice doesn't get us anywhere. To Michael's
point, the one, and I'm going to jump ahead a little bit, but the one that really bothers me that I've been pushing for a long time, and I've said it on the show, we rank 50th in racial economic equity. We're 50th. We're last. We're not 25th. We're last. We are dead last. We are 50th. That's supposed to be a Democratic talking point. Now, we shouldn't be upsetting somebody. We shouldn't be upsetting anybody on the Democratic side of the aisle by saying, we want to work on this. Here's why we think we rank 50th, whether you're talking about property taxes killing minorities and then killing this state because of all the subsidies and things that have to happen when you just make an economic region so non-viable for jobs. There's the social costs of that, and everybody pays for that. And our education system, what's happening with Chicago schools, we should be highlighting all these things. When you're spending $30,000 per student and we're getting the results that we're getting, no, we can be aggressive on these things. I don't know why we're afraid.
Willhauer brought up the racial equity issue on the floor this week and said, here we are doing all of this, and yet for somehow, some way, we're still last. But to Michael's point about Miller's speech, just real quick, that was the spirit behind his speech, was saying, hey, look, we're here and we've been here 3 days and been on the floor for a grand total of 2 hours, paid ourselves $90,000 in per diem, and yet we've not done one thing about cost of living or anything that people care about. I think that's the approach. I agree with you, Collin. the sausage being made is most of the time irrelevant, but there's other ways to make use of something.
Let's carry on. As Mark said, we got a lot to get to. So let me get to the next thing here. Something that happened during this whole process, but really had nothing to do with lame duck, is Tony McCombie, House Republican leader, is under fire for a vote she made in 2023, 2 years ago. Now, the law did officially take into effect on Jan 1 of this year, so it is relevant to today, but it's from 2 years ago, crazy enough. And I don't want to get too much into the specifics of the bill because I'm not a policy guy. I don't really care too much about specifics. But just for those who maybe don't know, it's a bill from 2 years ago that changes some of the wording in the bill. So basically, state law requires that insurance cover cervical exams for women and prostate screenings for men. And so this bill changed women and men to all in each of those spots. The reason being, the sponsor of the bill said that if somebody changes their gender, if a male changes their gender to a female, they still have a prostate. They still have a chance to get prostate cancer. You still want them to get screening. So that's the reasoning behind the bill and the change. Only 3 Republicans voted for it. One of those was Tony McCombie, and our circular firing squad on the right, who really loves to take down any Republican they possibly can, have chosen Tony McCombie as their next target. Now, some of you may agree that they should go after her for it. I respect you for that. Some of you may disagree, but we do need to cover it. Obviously, it's big in the news right now. McCombie, personally, I think she's kind of struggling dealing with this and answering it, which I think is it shouldn't be that hard to deal with this. Curious what you guys think. I'm sure some of you have some strong opinions on this situation.
Well, I remember the debate on this bill. And I know Senator Marwick gave a really strong speech, I think pointing out what you said, Collin. I voted no on the bill. Here's my overall thought in general when you're trying to analyze bills. So many bills are trick boxes. And we just talked about the gun bill, that if you vote for it or against it, you're going to pay the price somewhere in the state. And that's kind of the problem right now, is as much of what we vote on, whether you vote yes or no, there's going to be some bad aspect in the bill that's going to hurt you one way or the other. And so certainly,
Steve, can I ask you, because you're part of it, so I want to ask you, if they had just written it to make the change from male to born male and then female to born female, I feel like that would have left less ambiguity instead of just saying all, and then maybe more people would have been willing to vote for it. I thought that would have been the common sense approach, because I do get what the sponsor wants to get done, but the word all in there to me is concerning. I do think that opens up potential for problems. So if they had just added the word born, would that maybe have solved the problem?
I don't remember what all was in the bill, because it wasn't just that in the bill. It wasn't. So I couldn't tell you, because I can't recall off the top of my head. I just can tell you that the debate on the floor was pretty ridiculous, but there were some very sincere people that were speaking. And so, again, there's always bad things and good things in bills. And so as a whole, you've got to kind of analyze what you're going to do about it.
Yeah, and listen, the bill itself for sure could have been written better. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, well, the bill itself, absolutely. I mean, again, I voted against the bill, so that just shows you what I thought about the bill when I was on the floor.
Yeah,
but I do think it. We were just talked about in the last segment how Republicans should be emphasizing this and emphasizing that. I agree. So let's as a party unite, go after people, the bad guys in the political system right now. And so I think too much of this is focused on eating other Republicans. And I've got news for everybody on this panel. You can find bad votes from every single member of both houses in the Capitol. Every Republican, every Democrat has taken votes on bills that have good things and bad things. And you can take your time and point out all the bad things. And there's a certain number of people that want to do that. But we've got to realize that as a party, we've got to be united. And we've got to fight for all the things that our constituents care about, cost of living, et cetera. And so, that's just what I would say about that, because a lot of people that say a lot of nasty things live in very fragile glass houses.
Well, I mean, for a lot of these people, I mean, when Jeannie Ives isn't conservative enough for you, when you would go down the list of the people that they've been going after lately, and it's like, okay, who's pure enough at this point? I don't think there is anybody who is pure enough for this group, which is why I don't really care what they have to say. I think my concern here really is, I've talked about it with respect, and I know some of you will disagree with this. I think one of the biggest challenges for our House Republican caucus is their inability to communicate well, to message well. And the fact that McCombie struggled so badly to deal with this challenge is emblematic of that lack of ability to message and communicate. This should have been an easy thing to deal with, but by calling Illinois Review fake news, and then by going after some of these people. And I don't know if you saw, but on Facebook, she's doing the laughing emoji on some of these people's comments, and the love hug emoji to show sarcasm on some of these people's comments on her page. Like, she's goading them. And to me, it's like, this is emblematic of our problems. We're not very good at communicating. And if you can't handle this small of a challenge, how can you take on JB Pritzker and his press shop? How can you take on the Democrats and the unions? This is the smallest of controversies. And forgive me, again, I know people know that I've got my challenges with McCombie, but we teach classes on crisis communications, and the top 3, 4, 5 things we say do or don't do, she screwed all of them up. If we're this bad on this small of a thing, no wonder we can't win a Dem election.
Yeah, I agree with you, Collin. And I feel, I have some strong feelings about this situation. I agree with some of the things that Senator McClure said, and I disagree with others. But there's a difference, I think, in philosophy, obviously, in our party about fighting amongst ourselves for no reason versus like accountability. And you're right, everybody probably does have bad votes. Some have more bad votes than others, and that's what people get hung up on. But realistically, to your point about the response, I mean, what some people view as a bad vote, other people are doubling down on. And that's what I think the problem is. There wasn't even an ability to say, hey, we messed up. Yeah, we support it's just like the gun bill. We support the intent behind the bill. We want people to have insurance coverage for cancer screenings, but there was no ability to make a admission of a mistake there. There's only one reason in Springfield why we are deleting gender specific language. And we all know what it is. It's to appeal to the transgender, issue, to make these people feel more comfortable when they walk into a doctor's office. It's to make it feel normal. And when you vote for stuff like this, you're playing into that. And that's what I think people are so upset about. And, a bunch of people voted no. A majority of the caucus voted no on the House. And I think every senator voted no. And yet we've got 5 people in the House that are doubling down on this and then spiraling, causing infighting over an issue that we really could have just said, hey, look, got it wrong.
Or Collin, or maybe some balance. Say, hey, I respect your opinion. I hear you, and I get that. Here's what I thought, and I think, listen, we can find some common ground. Instead of just saying, you're wrong, I'm right, hard stop. I hate that whole, period. I'm right, no more discussion. Like, it's a temper tantrum, and we could just say, hey, I hear you, I get it, I understand your concerns, and I think we could have all moved on from this.
And this is not the only bill. This is if you actually dug further, this is not the only bill that has done very similar things. There are 3 or 4 bills out there in the last 2 years that have made gender neutral language as it relates to mandated insurance coverage, with pretty similar roll calls on them.
Yeah, not even just insurance coverage. I think they've been kind of doing that with changing the gender language throughout all statutes. They've been smoothing that. I'm just curious, Steve. Was this a solution looking for a problem? I mean, were insurance companies actually denying coverage for certain sort of things, or was this just done for a show? I'll be honest, I missed this. This whole thing. I just got back from way too many days in Disney World, so somehow I missed this one. But
much.
I'll put it this way, Mark. The discussion on the floor was that people were getting turned away, and but I can't imagine in real life, in the real world, that happened. So the statements on the floor were that was the case, but in reality, I just can't imagine that was happening. And by the way, there have been other bills as well as that have changed language, both of which some of which, by the way, that I'm aware of because I'm the floor leader for the Senate Republicans now, that would surprise you with the roll call. Again, as I said, there are some bad votes that people are taking, and to just focus on one for one member is certainly, there's a reason behind why they're focusing on her. That's fine, but if we're going to look at votes, there are plenty of bad votes, including involving changes in language that people voted on some of which that are piling on Tony right now. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah.
I think part of the problem for Tony is that she's kind of sort of the highest ranking Republican in the state now because we don't have much.
Yeah.
So all the I
other than
remember
the hood at the federal level, but yeah, you're right.
Yeah, but no, Hood at the federal level though, he's not elite. You know, he's not the would the minority leader of the caucus be higher than a rank and file congressperson? I mean, it's something happened to me locally here where you just Republican after Republican just lost, and then all of a sudden local grassroots Republicans wanted me to deal with the park board, the school board, the town. They wanted me to deal with everything. I'm like, hey, you guys are going to have to deal with that on your own. I'm not the catch-all for everything. So I think there's going to be an extra spotlight on Tony for a while, simply because of the fact of we've got a couple of Congress people, and then that's it.
This is an unforced error. This is an unforced error. I guess I wanted to put that in there. This is an unforced error. We do less stuff like this, and it makes things a lot easier.
Well, from what I'm hearing from you and maybe even from Collin, like I said, this one was off my radar. I don't know if the unforced error was as much on the follow-up versus on the vote itself. It's like, sometimes you can say, yeah, it wasn't perfect, Bill. I would have changed language differently. You can't vote for part of the bill. You have to vote for all of it. We don't want people who have issues not getting a prostate screening. That's not fair. So it's not an ideal bill. I hear you. Here's why I did it. And one of the things that I always did, because I was in a pretty difficult situation in my district, from no matter how I voted, I was going to have a bunch of stuff from either side. And one story, if I can digress shortly, was I have a nuclear power plant near me where a lot of people in my district worked, and I voted against the nuclear power plant bailouts both times. And once I talked to everybody and gave them my explanation, they were usually fine, but I always gave my thorough explanation as to why I supported or didn't, in that case, didn't support the bill. So I think that may be the unforced error, and I'm catching everything right now. But I think how you respond when people are upset matters as much as what you did in the first place.
Yeah. Again, personally, I understand the vote. Thank God I don't have to be down there, so I don't have to say whether or not I would have voted for it. But like, I get it. Just explain it better and show some respect to the conservative wing of your party. I understand that group doesn't tend to show respect to you, but if we're going to say big tent party, then that means everybody. That means even those conservatives who maybe drive you crazy, or those liberals or moderates or whoever else who drive you crazy. Big tent means big tent. So you can't say it and then not actually do it. Michael, you've been trying to jump in. So final word, then let's move on.
Yeah, I was just going to talk. I know that we had alluded to, like, did this bill really need to happen? And when this was kind of blowing up, I Googled it and I found an article from PBS from 2015 where they were talking about how there would be biological males that were identifying as females that would, tell their insurance provider that they were a female. So whenever the physician requested that the insurance company pay for a prostate exam, they were automatically getting denied because the insurance company was saying, well, why are we doing a prostate exam on a female? Because that's what their records show that this individual was. So I think, it's something that needed to be addressed. But obviously the language, because of the member that it was coming from, is not language that a lot of people on our side of the aisle are comfortable with. I think you could have written this bill in a different way, and I think it would have been a non-issue. But also, it was going to pass regardless. It didn't need any Republican votes to get through. So you could vote no and then save yourself a lot of headache. But then you may get headache from the other side on a mailer where they're saying you're denying, cancer screening. So it's trick bag. You lose no matter what.
To be fair to Tony McCombie, the issue of cancer is personal to her. So it's, to be fair to her, there's a reason why this vote was personal for her. But let's move on to the next thing. We kind of referenced it a little earlier, Speaker Welch and his staff turnover. So there's kind of two angles to this story. So 4 key members of his staff, I think it was 4, have left in recent weeks. And I'll tell you the reason I flagged this story. I flagged it because of who he hired as his new chief of staff. But before I get into that, it needs to be highlighted just the problems that Welch is having keeping a staff. McCombie put this out, but I think she copied pasted it from Rich Miller, where it said that he's had 3 chiefs of staff, 3 chief counsels, 4 issues directors, 2 research directors, 4 executive directors on the political side, and Welch hasn't been in there that long. So there's certainly something to be said for what Chris was talking about earlier, which is Welch's inability to run an effective caucus and manage a good staff. On the flip side, I flagged it because he hired as his new chief of staff a name that some of you guys are actually going to remember, Clayton Harris. If you paid attention or live near Cook County, you're going to know that he was the Kim Foxx acolyte who ran to replace her as state's attorney in Cook County. Far left, super progressive, and he is now Chris Welch's chief of staff. So that tells you where things are going to go the next 2+ years out of the House Democratic Caucus. That certainly tells you something. So a lot of directions y'all can take this topic, run with it wherever you want to go.
I mean, I think that's a sign that it's going to get even worse on the criminal justice related issues with, his chief of staff being a Kim Foxx acolyte, like you said, Collin. And I think it's going to look great on a mailer.
So there's 2 thoughts I have on Clayton Harris becoming chief of staff. The first one is basically that Welch, as seen from his dealings with Pritzker over this hemp bill, he keeps kind of emboldened, so he can kind of hire whoever he wants. You see some of the staff that are going out right now, they're kind of veterans of the House Democratic Caucus. They're kind of veterans of, Democratic politics and government in the state in general, and they're moving out, and he's moving Clayton Harris in. So it kind of shows the audacity of Welch, and that, he might say it's a bad thing, good thing, whatever, but he does show that he basically thinks he can do this, and there's not really going to be ramification for it. He's going to be able to push the old people out and move the new people in. But there is the second thing I want to bring up on this, and, I think you're right, Collin and Michael, that, they're going to get more progressive. Clayton Harris, he's a progressive. Well, let's be real for a second here. Another possibility that happened here is that Clayton Harris probably needed a job now because he didn't win the state's attorney's race. So it's not outside the realm of possibility that it may just be as simple of Tony Preckwinkle or somebody else gave old Chris Welch a call and said, hey, Clayton needs a job. You need a new chief of staff. He's got a strong recommendation for me, something along those lines. It's a simple solution, but it's not outside the realm of possibilities here also.
Fair.
No, I mean, I have lots to say on this. Like, if you need to get somebody a job, chief of staff of the majority party is not it. That's too important of a role. I was shocked by the changes. It's going to remain to be seen what happens a year or 2 from now. I mean, I worked with Tiffany. Tiffany Moy I thought was excellent at her job when she had it, just from the standpoint of actually physically doing the job. When Madigan left and Welch took over, everybody asked me, like, what's it going to be like now? What's it going to be like now? And what I said at the time was, I said, well, we're going to take a hard left turn, and then the voters are going to decide whether to bring it back or not. And frankly, this is just a continuation of the hard left turn. Welch is, like it or not, Welch is much more progressive than Madigan was, not even close. Especially that, boy, those first terms, I remember being down there with some of these soft on crime bills where it was just unbelievable, that passed the House, and thankfully some of them actually died in the Senate. So my understanding is this wasn't necessarily, my understanding was this is what Chris wanted to do. I don't know if anybody else has different details on that. And I remember how upset I was when the Bulls fired Doug Collins because I thought he was a great coach, and then they brought in Phil Jackson, right? So we're going to have to give Welch a little bit of leeway with his changes and why he's shaking up the staff and what he saw that was wrong behind the scenes, whether it be election results, whether it be policy side, whether it be timing. I don't know why he's shaking up the staff. My understanding is there's going to be some changes in his leadership team as well, which is interesting. So from the outside, it doesn't look like something that I would do, because I have respect for the people that are on their way out the door. But boy, I think it's a stretch to bring in somebody, that chief of staff job, to bring in somebody that hasn't been spending their time day to day in Springfield. To me is wow. That's a Hail Mary right there. So I'll be interested to see how Clayton Harris does. Had he done something that was a little bit more internal, or somebody that had more time spent on the ground in Springfield, even if he has all the ability in the world, just not having even been there for a year, would be a little concerning if I was in the Democratic
Well,
caucus.
It's a Brandon Johnson style hire. I mean, and that's not meant to be a compliment.
Well, to be fair to Clayton Harris, which is something that never has come out of my mouth once in my life, he was chief of staff to the governor like 15 years ago, so it's not like he has zero. But that governor also happened to be Rod Blagojevich, so what does that mean in that statement? But
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I don't have Clayton Harris's resume, but there's a day-to-day thing with the schedule. I'm purely talking from
Yeah,
getting
I'm with you, Mark.
Institutional knowledge.
what shell bills need to be looked like, and when the budget bill comes back, and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Now, maybe we can lean on the Senate and the governor's staff to do a little bit more of that stuff, but those would be the sorts of things that I would be a little bit.
And honestly, Mark, if you're right, if they want to lean on the governor's staff to do more of that, doesn't seem like the governor's staff's going to be willing to do more of that at this point. So you put yourself.
Well, they may be happy and choose to take over more of the process.
Fair. Yeah.
But the people, most of the people that I worked with from a Democratic staff down there that worked in the well and everybody, Jessica Basham and everybody on down under Welch, were always professional and had a great relationship with them. And as floor leader, Steve probably knows that there's a lot of interaction between you and floor staff on the other side. So it'll be interesting to see how the next year unfolds.
Yeah. All right. Anyone else have thoughts? I'll keep us moving if we don't. All right, let's go to this next one here. This is I'm a little bit of a broken record here, but there's a reason for it. As inauguration happened for the next session, for those who were successful in their elections, it's pretty much commonplace that you put out a press release saying, hey, I've just been inaugurated and here's my priorities. And so scrolling through these press releases on Facts right now, even just looking through these, something pretty much stood out to me that if you look at all the Democratic press releases, all but a couple have language there about supporting working families, lowering costs, making Illinois more affordable. And then on the Republican side, I only saw one, maybe two, maybe I missed one, I don't know, but I saw very few that ever had any of those words. It was always those Republican buzzwords of lowering taxes, cutting spending, economic growth, getting rid of regulations, prosperity and opportunity. And this is a constant problem. It's a messaging problem, but everyone nationwide agrees right now it's the cost of living. That's it. You can get fancy with it. You can do whatever you want with it, but right now it's the cost of living. Mark, I don't know what you see in your polling, but I can go back to the last 20 plus polls in a row where we ask, what are your top issues in Illinois? And taxes never get in the top. If you specify property taxes, sometimes it will break into those top few. But if you just say taxes, it tends to be down towards the bottom, while cost of living always comes up to the top. It's clear right now what the challenge is for Illinoisans. Now, should they want lower taxes? Yes. I'm not saying that they shouldn't want lower taxes, but right now, for Illinoisans, for Americans, the issue is that it's too unaffordable to live. And Democrats get this. That's why every single press release, even the far lefties, the crazy progressives, amidst all their other crazy stuff, they're making sure to talk about supporting working families, middle-class families, helping lower that cost of living, and yet Republicans refuse to use that language, and it just drives me crazy. I'm looking through Republican after Republican press release, and I'm seeing all those old-school Republican words: prosperity, opportunity, growth. We need economic growth, and they're right. That's correct, but the average voter, go ask somebody on the street if they give a blank about economic growth. They don't care. We need to connect the dots for everyday voters. And even still today, Republicans seem to be struggling with this, and it drives me crazy. So I had to at least vent. I don't know if you guys are going to agree or disagree, but I had to at least vent about this.
Well, cost of living always, here's what I would say about that. I saw about our polling. Cost of living definitely was number one. What I would say in the suburbs, though, is property taxes is a steady number two. She'll have immigration go to number one, property taxes number two. You have cost of living go to number one, property taxes is number two. Property taxes, especially when you start framing it in a way of we can't afford to stay in our house, it becomes a cost of living thing. That's a little bit less nebulous than, say, economic growth and spending and all these other things. I think property taxes.
I would grant you that, Mark, 100%.
Yeah, so I think it's a little bit, but yeah, you're right. We need to do a better job of connecting with the way the voters think and not the way we want them to think.
I try to think of like maybe how did we get here? To me, maybe it's just Republicans in Springfield are so focused about winning policy debates down under the dome that maybe they forget that our actual audience is the millions of people outside of the dome and the rest of the state.
I give that speech all the time. If you want to pass a bill, don't even try to win the policy debate under the dome. Go back to the people to get everybody ginned up, and then you'll get your bill.
Yeah, I think we tend to forget that we've got a bunch of people who want to win the debate rather than persuading actual humans, and it's using persuasive language versus using those issues in that debate language, and that's fine. I get it. I loved debate club when I was in school. I was pretty dang good at it. I'm sure that shocks all of you, but that's not where we're at. We need to persuade everyday Illinoisans to vote for Republicans at the ballot box. So you've got to use that more persuasive language. You get out there with this nebulous sort of economic growth and reducing the barriers to prosperity and opportunity. And yeah, it sounds great. And I understand what you mean. But Joe Smith, Sally Smith, their families, that Hispanic family down the street, they have no freaking clue what you're talking about. Meanwhile, Democrats are saying, hey, we're going to make it more affordable for you to afford to live in that house or to buy your groceries. Oh, they get that. We've got to connect the dots with voters. And you know what? If we didn't learn that lesson in the last election, I don't know that we're going to learn it in the next one, but I'm going to scream about it until we friggin' do.
Well, this is what I think. I agree with you, Collin. Taxes drive up the cost of living. But whenever you're talking to a voter, whenever you've had like 3 Busch Lights at the liquor hut and you're talking with all your buddies, they're not talking about the gas tax. They're talking about, I just paid $3.45 a gallon to fill up my car and it cost me $60. That's what they're talking about. So I think, we've been stuck in this rut where it's like, well, Latoya Greenwood voted to double the gas tax. And that's true. But the average voter doesn't perceive it as, man, the gas tax went up. The average voter is perceiving it as, hey, I'm paying $3.50 a gallon. If I go over the river to Missouri, I'm paying $2.85. Like,
Well, Michael, Mark said it well. It's how you frame it. It's all about the framing of the issue. For a lot of our clients, you'll see they talk about taxes. I'm not saying not to talk about taxes, but first frame it as a cost issue. And then you can say, look, Democrats have raised your cost of living by raising your taxes and giving themselves pay raises and blah, blah, blah. It's that theme. We have to be better understanding. You've got to give people one common, consistent, easy to understand theme. And then everything else just proves that theme. But you're giving them something, a short line to remember, not 36 different issues you're expecting them to remember when they don't care about politics.
Well, and another thing, I was down in Springfield for the inauguration, and I was talking to Senator Wilcox, who, has been on on our podcast multiple times.
He's an interesting guy.
That 50% of Illinois counties are border counties. They share a border with Illinois or Wisconsin or Iowa or Missouri. I mean, they're along the state border. And those voters are going to Missouri and Indiana and Wisconsin and these other states to get gas, to get groceries, all of these things, because it's significantly cheaper for them to do that than it is for them to buy those same things in Illinois. And I think that tees up a great opportunity for us, especially in some of these districts that are along the state lines, to say, hey, look at what you can get in Wisconsin. Look at what you can get in Missouri. If you want to be able to get the same things in Illinois for the same price, you've got to change who you're sending to Springfield, because that's one of the number one drivers of that difference.
Yeah. Well, and one of my goals in 2025 is I want to be more positive. So I want to give kudos to somebody that I saw do this well. Jeff Kiker put out his press release, and in there he went after the majority who've been a rubber stamp for a partisan governor's agenda instead of working towards nonpartisan solutions to challenges like the cost of living in Illinois, including housing, healthcare, public education, and raising a family. So Jeff Kiker gets kudos from me, actually going right at and using it to frame the other side as being extreme. That was a really good job, Kiker. So I'm giving you some kudos. So I'm trying to be more positive here, guys.
I just want
let's go to the next topic.
I just want to point out.
Oh, go ahead quickly.
I just want to point out that, Collin, you said you were great at debate in high school, but I'm pretty sure your graduating class had like 6 people in it. So I don't know what that says about you.
It's valedictorian. Does it matter how many people?
Oh, yeah. The land of the blind, the one-eyed man's king. Yeah.
Yeah, I was number 1 out of 7, man. That was great. Steve, I want to jump over to you on this. I know you had an issue that you've been raising here about non-citizens registering to vote in Illinois. Give our audience information on that.
Sure. So I learned that the Department of Human and Family Services in the state of Illinois was sending, and still is, as far as I can tell, sending benefit packets specific to non-citizens that also tucked away in the packet is a form to register to vote, already pre-addressed to their local county clerk. And so myself, and I had the same in county clerk downgrade. We had a big press conference, got some good coverage on Chicago television and downstate, all over the place, pointing this out. And, you know, if a non-citizen votes, they'll never be eligible to be a citizen, and they'll most likely be deported. And so we pointed that out. And at the same time that this has been happening, we have these new driver's licenses that are not, you can't tell the difference between a citizen's driver's license and a non-citizen's driver's license. So if you go to the county clerk's office to register to vote with this driver's license and you're not a citizen, they've got to sign you up to vote because they've got no way to verify your citizenship. And the Secretary of State's office told me on Monday that they refuse to tell the county clerks who is or is not a citizen, and they refuse to cooperate with law enforcement as to who is or is not a citizen. So you've got the Pritzker administration essentially tying your benefits, and as we all know, these are in the billions of dollars now for our taxpayers to pay for the benefits for non-citizens. And in these benefits packets, they've got to fill out the entire packet. Well, inside these packets are these voter registration forms. And so the whole thing is quite something. And everybody has always been saying that, a lot of Republicans have been saying that the whole plan here, and the reason why Pritzker's given so many benefits, is because he wants these people to vote for him. And it sounds like he's not waiting for that to be legal. He doesn't care anyway. And so that's kind of where we're at. So we had a big press conference. I got a bill in the Senate this session, and we'll see where it goes. But it's pretty outrageous.
I love these groups like Pritzker and all of his people. They're always like, every time a Republican brings up that there is either an opportunity for fraud, or Michael, I know you posted a situation where someone got charged with voting twice in this last election, you know, that there are some cases of fraud. They're always like, oh, you Republicans, you just hate minorities and don't want to let them vote. But then they do stuff like this. And it's like, guys, you're blatant about it. You're not hiding it. You're blatant about this stuff. And then you come after us and we say, hey, maybe we should be more careful about this. Because Steve, your point is a really good one. If you actually care about these individuals, if they go vote, they are putting their future citizenship status and opportunities at risk. That's what you're doing for your political gain. You are potentially putting them and their future status at risk. That's pretty damn selfish.
I had a rule, and maybe you can. I'll let you steal this, Steve, if this ever comes to debate. My rule is this: it should be easy to vote. It should be hard to cheat. We should all. If you don't agree with that, I don't think you belong in the chamber. And why are we making it easy to cheat in this, or even accidentally cheat in this? Like you get the person isn't assimilated to America. Yes, hey, I'm allowed to fill out this form. They send it in. Somebody knocks on their door because they're registered to vote. They start getting mail. They're a new registered voter. They have the driver's license. They vote. It's silliness, and hopefully this somehow gets cleaned up in the next few years at the federal level. But this whole thing is just backwards, and their excuses that they make, like, oh, poor people can't get an ID and all this other stuff. It's hogwash. They want to make it so that you can't prove the cheating is what they're doing.
Well, at the end of the day, here's what I think, and Chris will probably laugh at me at this, but based on what we're seeing with Hispanics potentially coming closer to Republicans, let's look 10 years down the road. If Republicans start dominating Hispanics, and we have a long way to go before we get there, I get that. But think about a world where Republicans were dominating Hispanics. I would love to see what that means amongst Democrats and how they change how they approach all these policies and migrants and registering them to vote. I mean, everything's political here. They don't actually care about those people being registered. They just assume they're going to be Democratic votes. If suddenly they start assuming they're Republican votes, suddenly they're going to be the ones for voter suppression, and it's going to be pretty hilarious.
Well, I want to talk about that very specifically, because with some of the bills that were being passed that were where, you know, if you apply for welfare benefits, you're automatically registered to vote. Unemployment benefits, all these sorts of benefit things, you're automatically registered to vote. If you apply to get your FOID card, get a background check, they know where you live, they know that you're not a felon. Guess what? You're not automatically registered to vote. Why do you think that is, right? So they're picking and choosing, even where you choose to put drop boxes, right? It's been proven that 70% or 65% of people that work out at gyms are Republicans. They're probably not going to stick a drop box at outside a local gym. However, they will make the county jail a polling location. They will make the county hospital, where older people are who are more likely to vote Republican, but they're going to make the county jail a polling location. So an analogy I used on the floor was, somebody is drunk, hits 4 people in a minivan, puts him in the hospital, he goes to the jail, he gets to vote, the 4 people in the minivan don't get to vote. That's the Democrat system.
Jeez. All right, let's go to the next topic here because we're running out of time. This one's going to be kind of fun. Hopefully y'all have some fun with this one. So we've seen reports of some polling. We've seen this from a few outlets that have reported that JB Pritzker and Juliana Stratton have done some polling. I'm pulling what I'm seeing here mostly from Facts, so I want to make sure I make that clear because Rich was sensitive about the fact that I talked about something a little bit ago and didn't give him credit, so I'm giving him credit here. But Juliana Stratton is the one that really interests me because, of course, Pritzker is going to be polling. Petitions get passed in about 8 months here. But Juliana Stratton polling, I think, is really interesting to me. We've talked about this on what's going to happen in 2026. Is Durbin going to run? Is he not? Is Pritzker going to run? Is he not? I also thought it was interesting some of the names that they included. In Pritzker's polling, they included Raja and they included Lauren Underwood. Raja makes sense. He's been traveling the state the last 3, 4, 5, 6 months. Michael's been following him like a hawk, all the different places he's been going throughout the state. Lauren Underwood kind of surprised me a little bit why they were polling her. She's done a lot of stuff within her district, but she hasn't done as much to try to build out maybe a statewide profile. So that one was interesting to me, but a lot of juicy things to talk about. Curious where you guys are all going to run with this. What do you guys got?
I think it's going to be the cannibalizing session of the century for the Democrats if they start. I mean, look at who you have lined up. I mean, Susana Mendoza is looking for something. Juliana Stratton is not going to just go away when JB Pritzker is no longer governor. Are they going to shove Durbin out, or is he going to leave on his own? Where do these higher ranking congressional members live? I mean, I'm just looking forward to it because what I hope happens is all of that works to our advantage, trying to do something in 26. If we have somebody who can even pull it off and have infrastructure behind them, if we have,
you get a packed primary on the Democratic side, you increase the odds that a far left progressive comes out of that primary. So there are certainly going to be opportunities created here if they've got clown car primaries. And as you said, there are so many extremely ambitious Democratic politicos in this state, elected and unelected, who've been waiting for their chance. And you've got 7 statewide offices. You've got the mayoral race coming up the year after that in Chicago. There are lots of opportunities here for these ambitious Democrats. And you're absolutely right. They are all going to be chomping at the bit.
I think. Go ahead, Chris.
Okay, so there's a lot here. The first one, I actually had not thought about Juliana Stratton for Senate. I thought it was the sure thing that if JB doesn't run, they're going to lay hands on her and make her the governor candidate anointed. But I did not think about Senate. Now, it'd be very interesting, perhaps, if JB does run for a 3rd term, which we've kind of already said that he's not in our minds, but he still can. Yep. He's in the driver's seat. He's the incumbent governor. So maybe they move her over to Senate if Durbin doesn't run for re-election. The other thing that's interesting, it kind of goes into what Collin Moseley was saying, was that it's not just the governor's race and this U.S. Senate race. We're talking about some old incumbents in the congressional delegation down in Springfield. We're talking about Danny Davis. We're talking about Jan Shankowski. Robin Kelly's getting up there in age, and how long is she going to be at the helm after she lost the internal battle for state party chair in the Democratic Party a couple years ago? So you're not just talking about those races, and plus you'll have congressional members like Raja or Lauren Underwood who are polling, and then there's going to be open seats in those positions. So you're talking about.
Casson is ambitious as hell. He's for sure going to want to run for something. Lots of these seats could open up. You're right.
Right. So you're talking clown cars across the board in the Democratic Party in the state of Illinois in 2026. Now, this could all be nonsense, of course, because JB might announce he's running for re-election, and I'm on the record a dozen times saying I won't believe anything about Dirk Durbin until I see either the press release or the obituary, neither of which have come out yet. So this all could be nonsense that we're talking about, but it is a fun exercise to think about. If everything goes the way that our assumptions think they're going, it's going to be clown cars across the state for the Democratic Party in 2026.
I actually don't think it's going to be clown cars across the state. It can be, but if I'm advising JB Pritzker, I would tell him to run for Senate. I think after 2 terms of governor, you own the victories. After 3 terms, you own the failures. And I think it gives him a national stage to do something a little bit different. We have a little bit more difficult. We're going to have a little bit more difficult of a time with budgets and stuff like that. He can say, "Hey, I came in, I cleaned up from Ronner, the budget crisis, everything else, and now I want to go to the next level." So if I'm advising JB Pritzker, I go to Senate. Juliana Stratton then would probably be one of the primary people for governor, but I think you'd have a lot of people in there. I think Susana Mendoza would probably be set up pretty well to run for mayor, not so much anything else. If I'm her, that's a safer play because she gets to keep her seat and it's in the off cycle as opposed to running for governor where she's tied up with that cycle again. So that would be if I'm advising JB, I go straight to the Senate, which then clears the Senate. I do think Durbin's gone. I don't think there'd be a long line of people. I don't think Raja, for example, or some of these other folks that you mentioned would want a primary JB Pritzker for the Senate position. I think JB just goes in and takes it if that's what he decides to do.
The scenario you described is not one that I've thought about. We're on the same page on I don't think JB runs again for the exact reasons you mentioned. And I've said that going back, I don't know, 6, 9, 12 months on these podcasts. So I agree with you there. Running for Senate, I'm not quite sure that ends up being the path, but certainly not running for governor. I think Stratton I think they grease the skids for Stratton for governor. Maybe a few wingnuts challenge her, but I don't think a lot of people will give her a serious challenge there. My assumption was the clown car would come in with the Senate race. I guess you're right. I mean, if Pritzker were to run for that, how many people are going to want to challenge him with the money that he has? Because it's, other than Raja, a lot of them are going to struggle to reach JB Pritzker type money. Raja has the cash. It's just so much harder to raise those hard funds. And so there's really only one person who could give him a run for his money when it comes to finances, and it is Raja.
Well, I have to say this also. If Dick Durbin hears that JB Pritzker wants a Senate seat, I guarantee he's running for re-election because Dick Durbin will sooner die in that seat than let JB Pritzker take his Senate seat. I guarantee that.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I mean, as has been mentioned, I mean, Democrats moved up the whole dang filing cycle another month. So all this stuff's going to happen a month earlier than it always happens.
Real soon.
Yep.
It's way too soon, but is what it is.
But
yeah, as I said at the beginning of this podcast, the fact that I've seen candidates announcing for Congress and for state legislature, I'm like, we got the municipals in a couple months. Could you take a breath for a second?
But Pritzker doesn't have to run for anything. He can just use his money to keep pumping, sucking up to Democrats all across the country, and then use his money to pump his name up in any Democratic primary for president. So he could just stay out of things. I mean, who knows? That's the wild card, the fact that he's so rich he can do whatever he wants.
Yeah, it takes him off the stage though, and then he doesn't have the being a senator is pretty nice. There's only been a couple thousand of them in the history of the United States, so
but then someone will retort, how many of them became president? Because other than Obama, that's just not been a common thing. We've seen it a little more lately with Biden, Obama, et cetera, but it's not
Kennedy.
Not an overly common thing. But Steve, your position is what I thought he would do, because to your point, he's got the PAC, he's got the relationships with the national media. He can stay in the media and be the chief foil to JB Pritzker, going on CNN and MSNBC and all the different outlets for nonstop for the next however many years, especially if he's unencumbered by having to care just a little bit about the people of Illinois, which is all we get at this point. But he could do away with all of that and not run for re-election and just fully focus on the media tours and all the rubber chicken dinners in New Hampshire and Iowa and everywhere else. So my assumption was he wouldn't run for Senate, but Mark's got me thinking maybe that's a possibility.
Well, just a few things that I've kind of seen. I remember it was August of 2023 at the DuQuoin State Fair, and Pritzker was down here and he was meeting with local, county Democrats. And he made a comment to them that was kind of fed back to me that he wasn't intending on running for a third term, and he asked the local Democrats down here if they would be willing to help Juliana Stratton if that was the play. So he was kind of, hinting at that, over 2 years ago. So I thought that was interesting. And then, like you had alluded to, Collin, Raja was down here in Southern Illinois back in October meeting with Democrat county chairs, and he's speaking at SIU Carbondale Law School at the end of the month. So I don't know if he's doing that with Dick Durbin's blessing or if he's just, putting himself out there and seeing what happens. But, I think he would be a strong contender, especially with that bank account that he has.
Oh, other than Pritzker, Raj is the guy for the Democrats.
Yeah.
Mayor
And
Mendoza,
the money raising is one of the biggest parts of it.
Mayor Mendoza, I think that would be, honestly, I disagree with her on a lot of stuff. Obviously, she's still a Democrat, but I actually think that could be the Chicago turnaround.
I agree.
I mean,
we're going to win in a landslide in 27. We got the biggest tent imaginable. We're going from Collin Moseley of the Freedom Caucus all the way over to the left in the city of Chicago. Susanna, if you're watching this, please run. We're ready.
Yeah.
We're ready. Take over, man.
But I mean, I just think that she has.
If it wasn't for the way she treated Leslie Munger, I would get on board with you. But I got to see a side of Mendoza that not many people have seen, and she is a vindictive, horrible person. And we saw that with how she treated.
And I don't know. And see,
2016 was a long time ago, Collin. Who cares?
Maybe she's changed, maybe not. But I'm just saying that's my what I've seen of her, and it's not the same thing you see in public. That's all I'm saying.
And this is not an endorsement either. I'm just saying, like, of the people that are on the short list, I mean, I think that she would be somebody that could actually turn the city around. But she likes being comptroller too. So,
well, she tried to run before for mayor of Chicago, and right after she got reelected, she turned around and ran for mayor of Chicago, and she had to get out. I don't know if she was the first person to get out or what, but she was.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that history.
Yeah, that was still earlier in her career. I think she's in a much better spot now, especially after the last couple of mayors that we've had.
Well, if I remember right, I think one of that was because...
Let me cut us down here just because we're running out of time. This has been a lot of fun. Steve, go ahead and give your final thought.
I was just going to say, whoever runs against Johnson will be in a strong position, whomever that is, if it's just one person, obviously. And as far as what Pritzker does, I mean, Mark, you have a very valid point. He's just has so much money. Does he want to have to spend that much time in Washington, D.C. when he can go to all of his different homes? And I mean, he has to look at this from a totally different perspective. And if he just wants to run for president, not do anything, he has the money to do it.
All right, let's go to our quick hits section. This is the news you can use. I think Bill Brady started that and the Senate Republicans continued it, but it is very useful for this section because the whole point of this is we don't want to spend a lot of time on this because we're running out of time, but for those of you who watch and listen to this podcast, we want to make sure you're equipped with some key things that you can be using, whether in your campaign, your organization, or just a quick social media post. But here's some key things you need to be aware of. So to our participants, as I go through these, if you got thoughts on anything, jump in, go ahead right away. Otherwise, then I'll move to the next one and just get us through these. There's a handful of them. First thing here, it happened during our break. Biden commuted the sentence for the former Dixon Comptroller Rita Crunwell. She stole $54 million from taxpayers in Dixon. Still, by the FBI, it's still believed to be the largest theft of public funds in U.S. history. LaHood, Chesney, Fritz put out some awesome statements on this, saying this is a slap in the face to the hardworking police officers, firefighters, city workers, and residents of Dixon. I mean, $54 million. If you want to talk about cost of living, well, we're trying to lower your cost of living, you working family. Look, Joe Biden just commuted the sentence of a Democrat who stole $54 million of your tax dollars, and now she's going to go free. Just a horrible thing. Showing Biden is showing he's just a partisan hack on his way out the door. This is ridiculous, and you can absolutely use this to highlight the differences between good governance on the Republican side and bad governance on the Democratic side. Anybody got any quick thoughts?
It's just one of many commutations and pardons that Biden is given that are just beyond the pale, shouldn't have happened, but that's part of the exiting office, I guess, especially nowadays.
Yeah, well, we didn't even talk about Hunter Biden, but I'm sure we could.
It's pathetic. I'll just leave that. It's pathetic.
Yep. All right, next thing here. So obviously being a small business owner, I get to see all the different rate increases that we see for all of our employees for health insurance. And I also get the notices from Blue Cross as to what led to those increases. And I got the notice this year, and there were 16 different laws just at the Illinois level, let alone at the federal level, that had mandates for the 2025 coverage, which caused these big health insurance rate increases. And I want to say yet again, I've said this on multiple podcasts, while some of these bills, bills may be popular down in Springfield. That isn't the point. The point is that Democrats over and over and over vote for these bills that lead to health insurance rate increases. And one of the biggest frustrations for working families, for middle-class families, is health insurance costs. And so you can highlight the fact that under Democrat rule, because of all these mandates that they keep putting, you don't have to get into the individual mandates, which actually might be popular, just the overall concept that Democrats over and over are voting to raise your health insurance rates. Are you happy with what you're paying for health insurance? No? Well, then you need to do something about it and vote Republican. So this is something you ought to be highlighting, and not enough Republicans talk about health insurance or just healthcare costs in general, but especially in a state like Illinois, a big driver of those increasing costs is Springfield Democrats and the mandates they put on over and over on healthcare. So it's something we should be talking about.
I felt like I was a one-man band fighting against this. I don't even think Republicans understand a couple of issues. Everybody doesn't understand when they pass these mandates. They don't. They're called ERISA plans. They only affect the non-ERISA plans. So the small business owner and the individuals and the marketplace plans, they don't affect unions, national companies, and all that other kind of stuff. And I get really upset when I hear the governor talk about how we protected people from junk insurance plans. Well, you mean those junk affordable insurance plans? Maybe there's certain coverage that I don't need, that I don't want in my insurance plan, right? I'm not going to have any more kids, so I don't need maternity coverage. I don't want to pay for it. And it's stifling to the economy because it stops small businesses from being able to prosper, and then it benefits the large businesses because they're not subject to all those state mandates.
Freedom of choice, unless we don't want to actually let you make a choice, which is most of the time. All right, next thing here. Yet again, we're seeing stories pop up about neglect at state-run facilities under J.B. Pritzker's watch as he focuses all of his attention on being the most partisan governor in Illinois history and his national political ambitions. We're seeing over and over these facilities, the administration, the different departments that he oversees. There are problems constantly every week in the news. This past week, we saw there was a story in the Tribune about delays and challenges with moving people out of Choate and all the challenges that were there. Then we saw about the lawsuit about neglect at the mental health center. What was the story about Anthony Stringfellow? This story I'm reading here at the Madden Mental Health Center in Maywood. We're just seeing over and over these stories with DCFS, IDHS, and all the other departments that are under Pritzker, and all these problems rise. And yet no one seems to say, hey, maybe J.B. Pritzker should do something about it. Again, another story about the failures under J.B. Pritzker's watch. At this point, that is a very, very long list, but we need to be highlighting those because at some point someone's going to actually take notice that this governor just doesn't seem to care about Illinoisans.
Well, look at the issue too with the home in Chicago, where they were sending DCFS kids, and there was sexual abuse, and there's all kinds of horrible stuff happening there. So, yes, I mean that seems to be kind of what's been happening over the last few years. Is the agencies are not managed well. There's not just abuse happening, but also they can't even find enough people to hire at places that they've had openings for years. And they keep every budget telling us how now they're going to have this increase in salaries, and we're going to do this, and it never gets any better. And so, I mean, you do everything to change things and nothing changes. I think that at a certain point, maybe we need to have other ideas and somebody else in charge, because his agencies have been a total failure.
Yeah, and 6 years into Governor Pritzker's term, he can't blame, though he'll continue to try, but he can't blame Ronner for all of these problems. He'll continue to say this was the disinvestment from forever ago. It's been 6 years. You haven't fixed it. Get on the job.
This is why he's not running for governor again.
Yep, I agree. Next, wage increases. So, working families trying to afford, especially in a time of high inflation and rising costs, if wages keep up, you don't care as much about rising costs, but if wages don't, you do care. And in the state of Illinois, we are now ranked 44th in the country for wage increases. Looking at a story in this SJR, another one in Cranes. The median salary in this state is now below the national average. You hear about how Illinois, it's okay that our costs are high because we also make a lot more money and that it balances out, but it's actually not true. The national average of the median salary is $59.2K, and Illinois it's 56.7. So we are 44th in wage growth over the last year, and our median salary is below the national average. And so when we talk about how unaffordable it is to live in this state, it's the high costs and it's the fact that wages are not keeping up. This is a problem, and it's happened under Democratic rule.
Yeah, 100% a result of bad public policy as far as the high costs go. As far as the low wages, I guess the first thing that comes to my mind is, and yet the Democrats are just shameless enough to continue to vote themselves closer and closer and closer to a six-figure salary for part-time legislative jobs.
Well, Collin, the thing that drives me crazy is when Democrats talk. This is why I get on Republicans so much, because when Democrats talk about creating jobs in the economy, helping working families, what's really the only thing they ever say? We passed a minimum wage increase. That's all they ever really say.
Right.
What middle class families are making the minimum wage? That's all they ever go to, but that's actually not helping middle class, hardworking families. That's helping low income families, and great. I'm glad for that. But they actually don't know how to speak to middle income families working. They have no idea how to speak to them. So if we ever figure it out, we can own that space. And here you see yet again Democratic policies. When we talk about wage growth, their first response is going to be, we raise the minimum wage. That's not the problem here. The problem is all wages, especially middle and higher income wages, are not going up. So congratulations. I'm glad you lowered the $15 minimum an hour minimum wage. But what about those working families who need to make a heck of a lot more because they've got kids and diaper costs and college costs, and they need to make more than that? You've done nothing for them.
There's a serious threshold there where if you make just enough to be above lower, or the lower class, you get nothing, and you're just left to survive. If you have a family and you're, the middle class threshold, Illinois does nothing for you.
All right, next thing. We've only got two more here. Next one is job growth. So Illinois' job growth has basically been non-existent since 2019. We're the doom grifters. We're the people who always want to talk about the negatives in Illinois, but the facts are the facts, which is the employment growth rate in Illinois is 0.6% in the latest report. The national growth rate is 1.3. But let's put this in context. Since October of 2019, the average U.S. employment growth has been 4.9%. In Illinois, 0.5. We have grown just 0.5% since 2019. That's how bad it is in terms of job growth in this state. So JB Pritzker wants to say, hey, look, we've seen credit upgrades and all this other. We're still 49th out of the country, 50th of the country, 48th of the country in all these different categories. Everybody went up. We were last. We stayed last. That's it. That's the reality. And 0.5% of job growth over the course of what is this now? 5-6 years, 5.5 years is abysmal. And that is 100% under JB Pritzker. That is almost his entire length in office as governor. So he can't blame that on Ronner or anybody else.
Well, and I read an article where they were talking about how the state of Illinois has made investments into Lion Electric, which manufactures like parts and stuff for electric vehicles. They're laying off 400 people, 400 employees this year. And when Pritzker was asked about it, he said, well, that's Trump's fault because he told people on Twitter that they shouldn't buy electric vehicles. And it's like, no, like it's because it's so difficult to operate a business in this state. And even with, millions and billions of dollars of subsidies and investments from the state, a business still can't keep their employees. Yep. That shows you that we've got some serious problems.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, last one because we're way over time. Sorry, guys. Public pensions. Guess and Mark may be our one who closes out this topic, but Illinois public pensions are now back almost near their record funding hole. We're at $144 billion funding hole. Cranes has said there's some signs of progress. Mark, I know there are some small signs, so maybe you'll point to that. But the bigger problem here is we're talking about the unfunded liability keeps going up. It went up yet another $1.5 billion last year. We're only $500 million below the high, which was set in 2021. This is a problem. I think we could all agree at least that this is certainly a problem. $144 billion liability that taxpayers have to cover.
Yeah, I would actually say that the bigger problem is the local Chicago, I think Peoria and some other ones. While the aggregate number is near its peak, it's a much smaller percentage of our rural budget. So when you factor in inflation, 140 some billion dollars hurt a lot more 5 years ago than it hurts us now. Not the right direction, but you're going to get the ebb and flows with the market and everything else. I think the story here though is that at the end of session they were trying to maybe spike tier 2 pensions, and it might be a little bit of a caution sign against that. We can't do what got us here in the first place. So as long as we stay on the trajectory we're on, we are going to be fine. My concern is that once they start seeing a little bit of light, they want to take some cash and do some things again. So I would caution against that, but nobody listens to me.
Fair.
I don't think the question is to Mark's point about tier 2. I don't think the question is if they go back and retroactively enhance tier 2. I think the question is when. I just they're on such a steamroll to get that done. Maybe it'll look totally different than what's been proposed already, but I don't see us getting out of this 104th General Assembly without them making some changes to tier 2.
Yeah, the momentum's there. Something's going to happen with tier 2. The question is, do they do something reasonable, or do they just look at it as an opportunity to spend, and reward their political supporters? All right, let's go to our final segments here. As always, we end with our OG and Clown of the Week segment. OG, original gangsta, someone you think deserves praise, whether it's in politics or just in general, go for it. Or Clown of the Week, if you think somebody deserves scorn. Anybody want to nominate anybody, go for it.
I nominate the easiest pick ever, which is Brandon Johnson as the Clown of the Week. That guy is unbelievable. I just watched an interview with him where they talked about how basically people think you're doing a terrible job. And he said, that's because the expectations are higher for me than anybody else ever in this position. They're like, what?
Yep.
And then he goes and says he wants to beg for more money from the state of Illinois, even though he spent money on his wife's office in Chicago and he's taking all these trips overseas and things. This guy is a clown.
Well, we haven't had an episode since the firing of the CPS CEO, so I would throw in there Brandon Johnson for that as well, since we haven't covered that on an episode. So I will double your nomination there, Steve.
My nomination.
I would triple. Go ahead, Chris.
No, you tripled down, then I'll go with mine.
Well, I would triple down, but it's so easy to do Brandon Johnson. I actually want to go outside the state a little bit. What's going on in California? Gavin Newsom is the clown of the week, and the OG of the week that kind of plays off of that is you look at what Trump said months ago and years ago about how to manage forest fires and stuff like that, and they didn't do what he said. So it's black and white, the difference between having a functional government that actually cares about executing their job and having a government that gets off on tangents that have nothing to do with their core mission.
Fair. And now people are paying with their lives and their livelihoods.
My clown of the week is country music singer Garth Brooks. I was watching the funeral of Jimmy Carter today while I was working today in the background. And for whatever reason, Garth Brooks decided it was a good idea for have the song he played at Jimmy Carter's funeral be Imagine by John Lennon, which is a song about when you die, your soul gets annihilated. There's no heaven. There's no hell. None of this matters. God isn't real. Religion is dead. So why would you play that song at Jimmy Carter's funeral, anybody's funeral? That's just stupid. Does anybody listen to the lyrics of songs anymore, man? It's just dumb. I hate John Lennon. Stupid.
I wasn't expecting that one, Chris.
Yeah.
Thanks.
my clown of the week is probably Speaker Welch, just because of all the drama going on with his staff and all the drama in his caucus with the governor's staff. Just that guy couldn't manage a 2-car funeral. So he's my clown of the week. My OG of the week.
Hold on, Collin, let me double your clown real quick. So Welsh for me for another reason. So he was asked about why Kamala Harris lost, and he said all about racism. You can't ignore racism and sexism. You have to acknowledge that's a fact. Then he said, clearly we missed some things on the economic message, but let's not ignore the elephant in the room, right? We have to acknowledge racism and sexism when it's been proven now that it was Democrats staying home that led to Harris losing. So who's racist then? Are you saying that your own party is the racist and the sexist? Because that's why your candidate lost. So I'm doubling your nomination of Welsh for this week. Go ahead with your next one.
My OG of the week, which I like this guy, although I've talked to him probably 3 times in my life. He's just kind of a grumpy old man. But Steve Reich, his inauguration speech yesterday for Tony was like he just like in a room full of Democrats and all their families just torched the crap out of the House Democratic Caucus, and so I will give kudos to Steve. Right now, granted, he said some things in there that were also attacking people that I work for, but the parts that he said right in the Democrats' face, man, the crowd was just it was hilarious.
I didn't see it, so I'll have to look that up. Thanks.
Yeah, I'd second that OG of the week. I was there in person. I heard it all, and Welch's friends and supporters were not happy.
Michael, I know you've got some. What do you got?
Yeah, I was going to say Reich as well, just because I witnessed that firsthand. Also, Nicole Laha, she gave a great speech as well because she was the original nominator for Tony, so she ranks up there. And Welch was having a hard time because the people in the crowd that were they were reacting and interjecting throughout the entire session. On Inauguration Day, and he struggled to kind of keep them in line. So it's another example of his inability to manage his own side of the aisle, even.
Michael, I know you posted in our Discord about CTA deactivating their X account. That deserves a Clown of the Week nomination.
Yeah, it's like, what are you guys doing? I mean, you don't want to communicate with the people that you're trying to serve. And then they created they deactivate their Twitter account. They say that they're no longer going to use that. And then they create an account on Blue Sky, which is basically like a place where liberals can talk to each other, I guess, that nobody else uses. And it's like, what is going on here? And they didn't have an explanation and no comment when they were asked why they were no longer using social media.
Yeah, the Chicago Transit Authority, maybe the one group the most on the planet right now that needs to be transparent and do better communicating with the public, and they pull crap like this. I'm sure it's really going to increase their odds of getting a bailout from Springfield. Michael, I know this also just hit the wire. I don't know if you saw it, but Amy Ellick would just announced publicly that she's been elected chair of the House Republican organization. So probably a kudos you'd want to give.
Yeah, congratulations to her. I think that's great. She'll be a good fit, and it's good for our region. I mean, she's kind of one of our hometown girls. So good luck.
It was cool to see. Anyone else? I got a couple more, but want to make sure everyone else has a chance.
All right, let me give one more. Let me give my OG, and I'm gonna do it for one reason. My friend Craig Wilcox, because I know he listens to this or watches this every week, so I'm gonna see if he mentions this or not. So I'm gonna say Craig Wilcox just as a test.
All right. Usually it's like late on a Friday night, and I'm like, dude, get some sleep. You need to rest. I'm getting texts from him. I'm like, it's okay. We can talk on Monday. It's all right. All right, I got some OGs. Kevin Coyne, who's been on this on the podcast, has done a great job building up his Safe Suburbs USA organization focused on safety issues. He's now been chosen as the new DuPage County Republican chairman. So kudos to you, Kevin, and best of luck. We need to do some better things in DuPage, and I know Kevin's already working hard to make that happen. So really excited to see what he does in DuPage County. Also, this is going to be a weird one. Never thought I'd do this, but kudos to Meta and Zuckerberg and Facebook that they're going to stop with the censorship and the fact-checking. I'll say I really like what Twitter/X has done with like the notes and things. I actually find it to be really helpful and really bipartisan and kind of just given the facts. And Facebook supposedly is going to go more that direction, which I think could be a really big positive. I also kind of chuckle that Zuckerberg basically admitted, Michael, I know you pointed this out, the Biden administration was not interested in working with them because all they cared about was censoring conservatives rather than actually just having a lack of censorship in general. So found that to be kind of funny. I got a couple clowns we haven't gotten to. So staying in DuPage, Keith Klingman, he is a former now DuPage Democratic committeeman in the county who was convicted now of putting swastikas on Republican candidate signs in Naperville, and he was convicted of that. So much of this garbage happens, and yet you rarely tend to see people held responsible. I'm sure Patty Gustin's really happy to see that this justice was done here, not to the level that it should have been, but at least he was convicted for something, which was the damage to property. So Keith Klingman gets one of my Clown of the Week nominations for sure. And last, we haven't done it in a little while. Tiffany Henyard just has to be mentioned here. And here's why, because as their government basically shuts down at this point because they can't get anything done, now their bus, what is it here? The agreement is now for the bus service has now passed or something. There's a shutdown. And so seniors now can't get their bus rides in the township. It's just ridiculous. We all know all the problems with Tiffany Henyard, but come on. We can all agree that at least let seniors get on their buses and get where they need to go. This is just ridiculous. So again, she's one of our permanent clowns of the week, but I got to make sure I mention yet another instance of her clownliness, I guess, if I could make up a term. All right, let's go to our closing thoughts. Everyone did really well this week, so let's start with our team and let our guests finish us off. Michael, give us your closing thoughts for the week.
I just want to give another congratulations to all the Republican members that were inaugurated yesterday, and starting a new term here, and it's a new day, and hopefully we can all take advantage of it and get some stuff done and hold some Democrats accountable, because at the end of the day, that's what we're all trying to do here.
Chris, final thoughts.
My final thoughts are rest in peace, former President Jimmy Carter. He was a good man who was given a raw deal as president. He's probably rated as one of the worst presidents, but I don't think anybody in their right mind actually believes that. He was a good man, even if he wasn't the best president. And may he rest in peace. And good man, Jimmy Carter. There's a poster in the background. Shout out Matt DeRay.
I didn't notice that. All right, Moseley, let's go with you next. Final thoughts.
Thanks for having me on this week. And we talked a lot about the shortcomings of the Democrats and 2026. And so I want to give a shout out to Matt Janes, Iowa GOP director. He and I have been talking a lot about working together on like some ballot harvesting stuff and just trying to really come together to unify behind infrastructure for our candidates in 26. So just looking forward to hopefully getting that done.
That'd be cool to see. Senator Steve McClure, your final thoughts for the week.
Well, we're finally back in the actual Senate chamber. It's been 2.5 years since we were last there. Now I'm going to actually be able to hear my colleagues when we debate each other, because the acoustics in that room are not that great. But the chamber looks beautiful. I just want to say thanks to all those that did the hard work, all the men and women who were a part of that project. It looks amazing. It's great to be back, and let's hope we can actually do some good things for our state over the next few weeks and months, because if we don't, our state's going to continue to go into this bad direction where everything's going in the wrong direction. And I think our party is ready to move things forward, and I think that if you look at the numbers between the presidential race this cycle and the one 4 years ago, our party is moving in the right direction as well. And so I'm optimistic about our future, and I'm ready to go and start to get some more good bills passed in the Senate and to keep fighting the good fight.
That's a good message to end on. Thanks, Steve. Mark, your final thoughts for the week.
As much as I think things are lining up pretty well for Republicans right now, both nationally at the state level, in terms of what Steve said about maybe moving forward a little bit and exposing, but people are realizing what the left is what it is. We got to concentrate on 2025. This is the first election where permanent vote by mail applies to township elections, which are generally partisan. And Republicans can't sleep on that. Otherwise, we're going to lose a lot of those township elections, because the Democrats start with a pretty significant advantage in most townships. So as much as we want to talk about 2025, we have to do the boring hard work of getting our minor leagues filled up and winning some local elections. So let's not sleep on 25.
Yeah, I love it. I wholeheartedly agree. Let me close just with what I started with, which is, if you're know a candidate or are a candidate, please come out, get trained, make sure you're as effective as possible. I mentioned Normal, January 25th, Edwardsville, February 1st, Plainfield, February 8th. Go to leadershipinstitute.org if you'd like to attend, or contact us if you want to do a training in your area. Finally, again, take our survey. Let us know what you like and what you don't like about these episodes so we can be even better in 2025. Go to long9.studio/survey. Thanks to everybody for being part of this. Lane Davis for taking time off of your vacation to help produce this episode. Abe Levy for stepping in and doing the hard work the day-to-day. Really appreciate you guys. Thank you to our guests and our participants. We'll catch you all next week on the Smoke Filled Room.